Ariella Uemana was only 29, and as far as she knew, life was going exactly the way she had always hoped. She lived with her husband, Kamau Odinga, in Kigali, Rwanda. Kamau was a successful businessman from Kenya, and everyone around them believed they were the perfect couple. They had been married for several years, and although no marriage is perfect, Ariella truly believed they loved and respected each other. When Kamau suggested celebrating their wedding anniversary with his relatives, she happily agreed. She dressed up, bought a thoughtful gift, and looked forward to a warm evening filled with laughter and family memories. The restaurant was beautiful, and the dinner started well. Kamau's parents, cousins, and siblings welcomed her with smiles. Everyone chatted happily, switching between English and Swahili. Ariella understood only the English conversations, so whenever they spoke Swahili, she simply smiled politely and waited for someone to translate. If she had done this many times before, and it never seemed like a problem. Halfway through dinner, Kamau leaned back in his chair, looked at one of his cousins, and said something in Swahili. The whole table burst into laughter. Ariella smiled too, even though she had no idea why everyone was laughing. Then Kamau said another sentence in Swahili, this time even longer. His aunt covered her mouth, trying not to laugh too loudly, while his brother shook his head with a grin. Ariella felt a strange knot in her stomach. The laughter didn't feel friendly anymore. It felt like she was the reason for the joke. She looked at Kamau and asked softly, "What did you say?" Kamau barely looked at her. "Oh, nothing," he replied with a casual smile. "Just a family joke. You wouldn't understand." For a few quiet seconds, Ariella simply looked at him. Then she smiled gently and answered in clear, natural Swahili. Understood every single word. The room froze. Every smile disappeared. Forks stopped moving. Even the waiter standing nearby seemed to notice the sudden silence. Kamau's face lost all its color. His confident smile vanished in an instant as he stared at his wife in complete shock. Around the table, his relatives looked from Ariella to Kamau without saying a word. At that moment, Kamau realized the secret he had depended on throughout their marriage had fallen apart with just one sentence. No one at that dinner knew the full story except Ariella. Long before she met Kamau, her career had taken her across East Africa. She had worked for an international NGO for 6 years, helping with community development projects in Nairobi, Mombasa, and Arusha. During those years, she worked closely with local families, government offices, and community leaders. Almost everyone around her spoke Swahili every day. At first, she understood only a few simple words, but she was determined to. She practiced during meetings, asked her coworkers to correct her mistakes, and even chatted with shop owners and taxi drivers. By the time she left the NGO, she spoke Swahili as naturally as it. When she later met Kamau, the subject of languages never really came up. They spoke English together from the beginning, and that was enough for both of them. Ariella never thought it was important to tell him that she also understood Swahili. To her, it was just another skill she had picked up through work, nothing more. But now, after hearing what Kamau had said at the anniversary dinner, everything looked different. She suddenly remembered all the family gatherings where people switched to Swahili in the middle of conversation. Kamau always smiled and said, "We're just talking about old family memories." She had believed him every single time. She remembered birthdays, holidays, weddings, and weekend visits where everyone laughed after Kamau whispered something in Swahili. She would smile politely, thinking she had simply missed a funny story from his childhood. Now she wasn't so sure. One memory after another came rushing back. The quick glances, the hidden smiles, the sudden silence whenever she walked closer. Moments that once seemed harmless now felt completely different. As she replayed those years in her mind, Ariella realized something. The anniversary dinner had not been the first time Kamau had spoken about her in Swahili. It was simply the first time he discovered that she had understood every word all along. That night, Ariella could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while memory after memory played through her mind. For years, she had believed Kamau's family liked her. They always smiled, invited her to family events, and treated her politely. But now she wondered if those smiles had been hiding something else. She remembered a birthday party where Kamau had whispered something in Swahili to his cousins. They all laughed so hard that one of them nearly spilled a drink. When she asked what was so funny, Kamau smiled and said, "It's just an old family story." She had believed him without asking another question. Then she remembered a Christmas dinner, a wedding, and even simple Sunday lunch. Every time the same thing happened, Kamau would switch to Swahili, say a few sentences, and everyone would laugh while she sat there smiling, completely unaware of what had just been said. Now she finally knew. The jokes had never been harmless. They had been about her. He had made fun of the way she dressed. He had joked that she was not as smart as people believed. He laughed about her career and said she cared more about work than family. The deepest wound of all was hearing him joke about their struggle to have children. That was something Ariella had cried about in private, believing her husband understood her pain. Instead, he had turned it into entertainment for his relatives. As if that was not enough, Kamau had spent years telling his family stories that made Ariella look selfish, proud, and difficult. He had slowly created an image of her that was completely false. No wonder some relatives always seemed distant. They had only heard his side of the story. Ariella wanted to confront him immediately. She wanted answers. She wanted him to explain everything. But instead, she stayed calm. If Kamau had been hiding the truth for years, she decided she would not reveal what she knew after just one dinner. She would stay silent. She would listen carefully. And this time, every word he spoke in Swahili would become another piece of it. The next morning, Ariella acted as if nothing had happened. She smiled, made breakfast, and spoke to Kamau the same way she always had. If he was nervous after the anniversary dinner, he did not show it for long. Within a few days, he was back to speaking Swahili freely whenever his relatives called. He believed his secret was still safe. Ariella never interrupted him. She simply listened. When Kamau stepped onto the balcony to answer phone calls, she quietly heard every word. When he played voice messages from his brothers and cousins, she understood every sentence. During family visits, she sat quietly, smiling politely while everyone assumed she could not follow the conversation. The more she listened, the more her heart sank. The insults had only been the beginning. One evening, Kamau laughed with his brother about Ariella's saving. He told him exactly how much money she had and joked that she was too trusting to notice what was happening around. Another day, he spoke about the inheritance Ariella had received from her late parents. He called it our future money, even though it belonged to her alone. Then the conversations became even more disturbing. Kamau encouraged his relatives to convince Ariella to sign different documents whenever the right opportunity came. He told them not to pressure her too much at once, but to be patient until she trusted them completely. They discussed property, investments, and bank accounts as if they already belonged to them. Ariella felt her hands shake as she listened. This was no longer about cruel jokes or embarrassing comments. This was a plan. She finally understood why Kamau had spent years making her look foolish in front of his family. If people believed she was careless or selfish, they would trust his version of every story. He had been building that false picture for a reason. At that moment, Ariella realized something that changed everything. The humiliation had never been the real goal. It had only been a distraction. The real target had always been her future, her finances, and everything she had worked so hard to build. Ariella wanted to cry. She wanted to shout. She wanted to ask Kamau how he could betray her after everything they had been through together. But she did none of those things. Instead, she stayed calm. She knew that anger could make people act too quickly, and one mistake could warn Kamau that she knew the truth. If that happened, he would hide everything. So Ariella decided to be patient. The first person she contacted was a lawyer she had trusted for years. She did not accuse Kamau of anything. She simply explained what she had heard and asked what steps she should take to protect herself. The lawyer advised her not to make any sudden moves and to carefully gather information before taking legal action. Next, Ariella met with her financial advisor. Together, they reviewed every bank account, investment, insurance policy, and property document connected to her name. They checked which assets were shared and which belonged only to her. She asked dozens of questions and took careful notes, making sure she understood every detail. A few days later, she quietly met a longtime friend who worked in banking. Her friend helped her understand how to better monitor her accounts and recognize any unusual financial activity. Ariella wanted to be prepared for any. She did not close accounts. She did not move money. She did not confront Kamau. She simply prepared. At home, nothing changed. She laughed at Kamau's jokes, shared meals with him, and carried on with daily life as usual. Kamau believed everything was normal. He had no idea that every phone call, every conversation in Swahili, and every meeting with his relatives was giving Ariella another piece of the puzzle. With each passing day, she became stronger, wiser, and more prepared. Meanwhile, Kamau grew more confident. He believed his wife still trusted him completely. What he did not realize was that, without saying a single word, Ariella was quietly taking away every advantage he thought he had. After weeks of listening and learning, Ariella felt she had enough information to take the next step. She did not want to guess anymore. She wanted proof. So she came up with a simple plan. One evening, while they were having dinner at home, she casually mentioned that an old business contact had told her about a large investment opportunity overseas. She said the project could be worth millions if everything went well, but there was still some paperwork to complete before it became official. Ariella acted excited, but also a little nervous. "I hope it works out," she told Kamau with a smile. "If everything is approved, it could completely change our future." Kamau tried to stay calm, but Ariella noticed the excitement in his eyes. He asked a few questions, pretending he was only curious. She answered them carefully, making sure the story sounded believable without giving too many details. That night, exactly as Ariella expected, Kamau called his brother. He switched to Swahili, believing his wife understood nothing. Ariella quietly listened for the Kamau repeated every word she had told him. Soon his brother was laughing with excitement. Within days, more phone calls followed. His cousins, his aunt, and even other relatives joined the conversations. They spoke about the imaginary investment as if the money already belonged to the family. Some discussed what they would buy. Others talked about businesses they wanted Kamau to fund. A few even suggested that Ariella should quickly sign any papers Kamau placed in front of her before she changed her mind. Their greed became impossible to hide. What none of them knew was that Ariella had already spoken with her lawyer. Following legal advice, she carefully kept records of every conversation she was allowed to document and wrote detailed notes with dates, times, and exactly what had been said. Without realizing it, Kamau and his relatives were exposing their own plans. The fake investment did not exist, but the greed, the deception, and the evidence were all completely real. A few weeks later, Kamau's family gathered in Kampala, Uganda, for a large family celebration. Relatives had traveled from different cities, and the house was full of music, food, and laughter. To everyone else, Ariella looked relaxed and happy. She greeted people warmly, helped in the kitchen, and joined every conversation with a smile. Kamau was more confident than ever. Because he believed Ariella still did not understand Swahili, he spoke freely throughout the day. Every time he wanted to make people laugh, he looked at his relatives and made another joke about his wife. Some comments were about her career. Others were about the imaginary overseas investment that he believed would make him rich. He even joked that Ariella was so trusting that she would sign almost anything if he smiled at her. His relatives laughed, but this time something was different. Not everyone found it funny anymore. Ariella noticed an older aunt looking down at her plate instead of laughing. One cousin quietly walked away after hearing another cruel joke. Even Kamau's younger sister looked uncomfortable and avoided making eye contact with Ariella. It seemed that some family members were finally realizing that Kamau had gone too far. Ariella stayed calm. Without attracting attention, she quietly recorded the conversations she was legally allowed to record. She also wrote down the time, the place, and who was present during each discussion. She wanted every detail to be accurate. As the evening continued, Kamau became even more arrogant. He believed everyone supported him, so he kept talking without thinking about the consequences. The more he spoke, the more evidence he gave against himself. Ariella never argued. She never interrupted him. She simply listened while Kamau destroyed his own story, one sentence at a time. By the end of the celebration, Ariella had collected more than enough information. If Kamau later claimed that everything had been a misunderstanding or a harmless joke, his own words would prove otherwise. He had built the case against himself without even realizing it. A few days after returning home, Ariella invited both her family and Kamau's family. She told everyone she wanted them to spend time together and hoped the evening would bring everyone closer. Kamau smiled when he heard the idea. He believed his wife was trying to fix small family misunderstanding. He had no idea what was really about to happen. The dinner began peacefully. People talked, shared food, and laughed together. Ariella stayed calm and friendly with everyone. She never looked nervous. Kamau slowly became comfortable again, believing everything was back to normal. Then, just as he had done so many times before, he switched to Swahili. Looking at one of his cousins, he made another joke about Ariella. A few relatives laughed. Feeling encouraged, he kept going. He joked about her career. He joked about the fake overseas investment. Then he made another cruel comment about her not being smart enough to notice what people were doing behind her back. Kamau smiled proudly, expecting another round of laughter. Instead, Ariella gently placed her glass on the table. She looked directly at him and answered in perfect, natural Swahili. Not just one sentence, not just one reply. She calmly repeated almost every insult Kamau had made over the years. She reminded him of the jokes he told at birthdays, weddings, holiday dinners, and family visits. She repeated his words about her appearance, her work, her struggle to have children, and even the conversations about her money and inheritance. Then she asked quietly, still in Swahili, "Did I miss anything, or would you like me to repeat more?" The room fell completely silent. No one moved. No one laughed. Kamau's relatives stared at him with shocked faces. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked angry. They finally understood that Ariella had known the truth for much longer than anyone imagined. They also realized Kamau had been lying to them and using them for years. Kamau tried to speak, but no words came out. The confidence he had carried for so long disappeared in a single moment. For the first time, he was the one sitting in silence while everyone else understood every word. The silence around the table lasted for several long seconds. Then Ariella spoke again, this time in English, so that everyone in the room could understand every word. She calmly explained that the anniversary dinner had not been the first time she had understood Kamau's Swahili. She told them she had been fluent for years because of her work in East Africa. She had stayed quiet after that night because she wanted to know the full truth before making any accusations. Then she opened a folder she had brought with her. Inside were carefully organized documents, written notes, and transcripts of conversation. She also played recordings that had been collected in accordance with legal advice. One by one, everyone heard Kamau's own voice making fun of his wife, talking about her inheritance, discussing her bank accounts, and encouraging relatives to help pressure her into signing documents. No one could deny what they were hearing. The room filled with disappointment instead of laughter. Kamau's mother slowly lowered her head. One of his cousins apologized to Ariella for believing the false stories that had been told about. His younger sister had tears in her eyes as she admitted she never knew how much pain Kamau had caused. One after another, several relatives made it clear that they would no longer defend him. Kamau kept trying to interrupt. "You're taking everything out of context," he said. "It's just a joke. You misunderstood." But every excuse fell apart almost immediately. Whenever he denied saying something, Ariella calmly played another recording. Whenever he claimed he had never discussed her money, she quietly showed another document or transcript. His own words proved that he had been lying. Finally, Ariella's lawyer, who had been waiting nearby, stepped forward and explained that legal proceedings would begin regarding the couple's financial matters and the plans to obtain Ariella's assets through deception. Kamau looked around the room, hoping someone would stand beside him. No one did. For the first time, he had no story left to tell because the truth was already speaking for itself. Months passed, and Ariella's life slowly became peaceful again. The divorce was finally behind her, and instead of looking back with bitterness, she focused on building a better future. She poured all her energy into her business, which continued to grow across East Africa. She traveled often, met new business partners, and created opportunities for many people. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly free. Sometimes people asked her why she had stayed silent for so long instead of confronting Kamau the moment she discovered the truth. Ariella always gave the same answer. "Being calm gave me time to see everything clearly." She realized that patience had protected her far better than anger ever could. If she had reacted too quickly, she might never have learned how deep the deception really was. By staying quiet, she allowed the truth to reveal itself. Kamau's reputation slowly fell apart, but not because Ariella tried to destroy him. The people around him had heard his own words and seen the evidence with their own eyes. In the end, his actions caused his downfall. Ariella walked away with something far more valuable. She kept her dignity, protected her financial future, and found peace of mind. As her story quietly spread from one person to another, many women across Africa found strength in it. They admired not only her courage, but also her wisdom. Because sometimes the strongest person in the room is not the one who speaks. It is the one who understands everything, stays patient, and waits for the truth to speak for itself.